Welcome to the second annual Digital Assessment Conference sponsored by Longwood University. My name is Onie McKenzie and I am the Vice President for Student Affairs at Longwood and very excited to share some information with you. I have some results from the 2013 Noel-Levitz Student Satisfaction Inventory, and I tell you what, I have way more information than I do time, so I'm going to do my best to just kind of motor through and make sure by the end of this presentation you know exactly what information exists within these reports and how to use them. I'd like you to know that we decided to administer the Noel-Levitz Student Satisfaction Inventory last spring, pretty much between February and March of 2013, and we went with the entire sample of 4,500 enrolled students. That includes our students who are taking both some hybrid online classes and also some face-to-face classes at some of our off-site locations. The students received an email invitation and they had to use an assigned unique code to access the web-based survey. Now, the recommended response rate for the SSS is about 20%, and we were aiming for 30% based on a 40% response rate that we'd received from the NESE back in 2011. And despite our best efforts, we had a pretty aggressive marketing campaign. We had multiple follow-ups. We used an incentive for participation. We only received 18% response rate. That aside, keep in mind these data represent responses from 792 students of all class levels. So I think it's worthy of a closer look. One thing about the SSI that's nice is this is a national standardized benchmark instrument, and what that means is that we're able to compare our student responses with those from about 97,000 students nationwide from 93 four-year public universities. This allows us not only to learn some helpful information regarding the expectations and satisfaction levels of our students and the degree to which we are meeting those, but it allows us to compare those expectations and satisfaction levels with those from the comparable institutions. Let's look at a few of the demographics regarding our respondents to discern the degree to which we feel they represent both our general Longwood students and the respondents from the national comparison group. Regarding the 792 respondents of ours, it appears that our females are overrepresented, but they are in the national comparison group as well. Primarily, our respondents come from our traditional 18 to 24-year-old age group. The class year distribution is pretty even with slightly more juniors. And note that our respondents include 57 graduate or professional students. That's a first for us. I think we have a fairly representative respondent group and it compares adequately to that of the national comparison group. Let's look further. Again, within the 792 respondents, we have 51 Black and African American students, which represents about 15% of our 322 Black African American students. We had about 14 Hispanic students, which represents about 9% of our 154 Hispanic students. We had 33 varsity athletes, which is about 14% of our 239 athletes. And we had 52 students who indicated a disability, which is about 17% of our 300 students with identified disabilities. We had 435 students from the Cook-Cole College of Arts and Sciences, which is about 13% of that currently enrolled student body. We had 88 students from the College of Business and Economics, which is about 16% of their currently enrolled students. We had 190 students from the Education and Human Services College, which is about 19% of their enrolled population. And we had 36 students indicate that they were from the College of Graduate and Professional Studies, which is about 23% of their currently enrolled students. This is a little bit confusing because we had 57 students identify themselves as graduate or professional student, but yet only 36 aligned themselves with the College of Graduate and Professional Studies. Welcome to my world. Continuing on, just to get a sense of the GPA and kind of what what groups are represented within the sample or the group of respondents. Let's see, most of our students are in the middle. So this group, it doesn't represent just of our achievers who have only wonderful things to say, and it doesn't represent just those who are struggling and looking for a way to express their frustration. In fact, and we're also hearing from only 107 of our students with a GPA less than 2.49, which is probably good because they need to be studying anyway. Out of the 792, 536 of our respondents, 67.85%, indicated that Longwood was their first choice institution. That's a slightly higher percentage than that of the national comparison group. Let's move into the survey itself. What's helpful to know is there are 70 items on the SSI, and they statistically are factored into 12 different scales. You can see them here. I probably don't need to read them for you. They're pretty self-explanatory, but we'll take time a little bit later to look at them a little more in depth. This is the visual layout. These are how the prompts and the scales are set up. I appreciate the consistent kind of intuitive flow to the SSI. On the scales, 1 is always low, 7 is always high. They typically offer a neutral point at 4. Conceptually, the scale goes from it's not at all, either important or satisfied, not very, somewhat, and then there's a neutral point to somewhat important and satisfied, just plain important or satisfied, or very important and satisfied. There's always a not applicable option provided as well. So this kind of gives you a sense of what it actually looks like from the student's point of view. Let's go back to these scales. It's kind of fun to think about, okay, of these 12 scales, which do you think Longwood students would rate as most important? We're going to kind of go through this, but we're going to do it with words and pictures and no numbers. And doing this so that we can start with the broadest interpretation. But I'll concede my personal need for hard evidence. I need to see the numbers so that I can come to the same conclusion. But people have different needs, so you number hungry folks, just hold on, they're coming. So let's look at this again. Out of these 11 scales, which ones do you think our students rated as most important? We're going to eliminate the responsiveness to diverse populations because that's a new scale, and the SSI only asks questions about satisfaction ratings, not importance ratings for that particular category of questions. Okay, what's helpful to know here is this is actually the order of importance. So the things that were rated most highly were academic advising, instructional effectiveness, safety and security, and on down the line. Kind of interesting to know. Okay, just to take it a little bit further, let's look at what can be considered strengths. And these are the items on which we had high levels of importance as well as high levels of satisfaction. What this does is it allows us to look at these things internally. What do our students say they value? And how well do they say we are delivering on those expectations? So in the end, this table can be summarized or perceived as our strengths. These are the 16 items that yielded high levels on both the importance and satisfaction scales. Specifically, they are the items that were above the midpoint in the importance and in the upper quartile of our satisfaction scores. I've listed them for you in descending order of importance. And the items that are printed in italics are the items that we added. They're institutionally defined for us. These are the things that we probably need to boast to others. You could say perhaps we need to recruit students based on these characteristics because we want to attract students who value these things, since this, according to our students, is what we are doing well. As you look through this list, I'm guessing some of these items you could have easily predicted. The items about comfort and enjoyment. Longwood offers a welcome feeling. Our campus is well maintained. It's safe and secure. We know that. We have accessible faculty. We have quality course content and good instruction within the major. And those ratings are very consistent with our NESE findings as well. But what from this list surprises you? Well, this is a nice change for us and a pattern that we've discerned over recent years, the much more positive aspects related to academic advising, now considered to be approachable and individual-centered advising. The faculty are much more willing to provide disability accommodations, and there's a commitment to academic success and the ability to experience intellectual growth. Okay, let's talk about some of the challenges. These would be the items that, you might say they need immediate attention. They could be perhaps perceived as retention priorities. Don't let the wording of these items throw you. The expectations on the SSI are typically stated in a positive nature, but it's the responses to these items that made them show up as challenges, because these items are of high importance to our students, but they received lower ratings of satisfaction. These are the areas where we are not meeting our students' expectations. This is where we have a large performance gap. Which of these items do you think we need to study further? Before, we learned that our students perceived their instruction within their majors as a positive thing, but not so much in the majority of their classes. Okay, this again corroborates the findings on our NESE, and I think it speaks to our need for a general education curriculum review, which is now underway. How hard is it for our students to get registered in the classes they need? What is it about our major requirements that is not clear and reasonable? There's some implications here. And then there's that pesky Longwood runaround. That problem seems to be rearing its ugly head again. And yes, parking is a problem, but really now. Okay, I need some numbers. Let's see what we can do. Still not there. Well, okay. All right, let's take a minute and we'll look externally, and we'll draw some comparisons with responses from our national comparison group. These are the 34 items on which our importance scores exceeded those of the national comparison group. And again, I've listed them for you in descending order of importance. So these are the expectations that our students tend to value at levels that are higher than their counterparts elsewhere. These represent our students' priorities. I have to say, I was struck by the academic nature of some of the items at the top of the list. Again, it seems to be that, in the past, students were a little bit more concerned with just getting involved, and now it appears their aspirations are higher and their choices are more intentional. There were 32 items on which our satisfaction scores exceeded those of the national comparison group and at the highest level of statistical significance. These are the things that our students say we do better than other students say their institution does. And this is the single item on which our satisfaction scores were lower than those of the students from the four-year public colleges and universities. Okay, we can work on that. That's something we can fix. Actually, I think the food selection is excellent in our cafeteria, but okay, it's not about me. All right, let's move on. What I have to show you for you now there are 3 summary questions on the SSI that provide an overall perspective of the student experience. Students are asked on a scale from 1 to 7. So far, how has your college experience met your expectations? 1, again, the lowest would be much worse than I expected, to quite a bit worse, about what I expected, better than what I expected, quite a bit better, to 7, which is much better than expected. They're also asked to rate their overall satisfaction with their experience here thus far. Again, it's going to go from not satisfied at all, a rating of 1, to 7, very satisfied. And lastly, all in all, if you had to do it over again, would you enroll here again? 1 is definitely not. 7, definitely yes. You'll see that all of our item means from that 7-point scale exceed that of our comparison group, but not at rates that were statistically significant. This is another way that I thought is helpful to look at these summary items. What I've done is collapse the top 2 response options for each item, and I've noted the percentage of students who responded with those more favorable responses. So far, how has your college experience met your expectations? Well, the percentage of Longwood students who responded with quite a bit or much better than expected was 34%, which is higher than the 21% from the national comparison group. The percentage of Longwood students who said they were satisfied or very satisfied with their overall college experience thus far was 69% compared to 56% of the national comparison group. And finally, when asked if they could do it over again, would they enroll here again? 72% of the Longwood students said probably or definitely yes, while only 61% of the national group responded in the same way. We like hearing that. All right, this is kind of quick little turn of events here. We've got some factors that are typically considered in the enrollment decision. And so on a 7-point scale, students were asked how important each of these items were in their decision to enroll. And this table provides both the means and a comparison of the importance weight ranking reported by our students with those with the national comparison group. Longwood students value these things more highly than others, it seems. Academic reputation, size, campus appearance, personalized attention prior to enrollment, and family and friends recommendations. Numbers. Finally, we're here. Okay, let me show you what we got. Well, first let's start with some definitions. Okay, the average scores, remember the scales run from 1 to 7, and these are simply calculated by summing the respondents' ratings and dividing by the number of respondents. Just keep in mind the scale score is not the same as the average of the averages. A performance gap. Okay, performance gap is the difference between the importance and satisfaction scores. Think about it though, the larger the performance gap, the greater the discrepancy between what students expect and their current level of satisfaction. Just remember, big is bad. When we're talking about the performance gap, big is bad. The smaller the performance gap, the better the students' expectations are being met. Mean differences. What I'm able to do for us is to compare the means between Longwood's ratings and the comparison group, the satisfaction means. If the mean difference is positive, then our students are more satisfied than their counterparts. If the mean difference is negative, then our students are less satisfied than their counterparts. We're also able to note statistical significance. The more asterisks, the more advanced level statistics, the more confident we are that these differences are not just due to chance. If there are no asterisks at all, then this level of satisfaction between the two groups is basically the same. Here it is. Wow, that's a lot to absorb. Let me see if I can break this down for you a little bit. All right, let's kind of approach this again intuitively. I want you to read from the left to right. First, let's discern things from an internal perspective, and then we'll go on to compare responses with the national comparison group. So let's note the order of the scales. There are the 12, and I've put them for you in descending order of importance. Be reminded that the difference between the importance score and the satisfaction score is called the performance gap. And again, the larger the performance gap, the greater the discrepancy between what students expect and their current level of satisfaction. So the smaller the gap, the better we are doing at meeting the students' expectations. Only 2 of our performance gaps are larger than 1: safety and security and registration effectiveness. Okay, little word of caution though, a little pause though. When you start trying to make meaning out of data that's provided to you at the scale level. Let's look at the safety and security scale. There are only 4 items that constitute that scale. The first is security staff respond quickly in emergencies. Fair enough, that's important. The campus is safe and secure for all students. Well, surely, we're in Farmville. That should be the case for us. Parking lots are well lighted and secure. Yes, we think so. Last question, the amount of student parking on campus is adequate. Uh-oh, there we got a problem. Before you try to make meaning of these results based on the scales, you got to dig a little deeper into the items. Okay, let's keep going. So what we want to do now is we start to look externally by comparing our responses with those from our national four-year public colleges and universities. Longwood students have rated all of these scales as being higher in importance than did the students from the national four-year publics. Our students are pretty clear about what they want, and they let us know. Okay, when we start to compare the satisfaction ratings, all of ours exceed those reported by students at the national four-year publics, and all at levels that were statistically significant. So take that in for a minute. That's a pretty impressive finding we've got going there. Okay, let's note that when we're comparing the performance gaps, all but 2 of ours are lower than those reported by the students from the national four-year publics. This means that there's a smaller gap between what our students expect and what they are experiencing than reported by the students elsewhere, excepting the items on safety and security and campus life scales. Then again, when you put it all together, this is what you're going to get. So now you know how to read these, and you can spend more time and come back. But there's more, because I am a beast, and I just couldn't stand it. So what we're going to do, I have these same tables for you that have been prepared for each of these 12 scales. We won't take time to go through them with any real meaning today, but I just want to make sure that you know they exist. So the first tables have to do with academic advising. And then we have 2 tables that comprise the instructional effectiveness items. These are the items that comprise the safety and security scale. These are the items that comprise the student-centeredness scale. These are the items that comprise the campus climate scale. And these are the items that comprise the concern for individual scale. Registration effectiveness, recruitment and financial aid, service excellence, campus support services, and 2 tables of campus life items. Responsiveness to diverse population items. And these are the table of items that were institutionally added. We comprise these questions. Take some time later when you've got it and come back and kind of dig into those, and you can make a little bit more meaning out of those scales results. Lastly, what have we got? There's more. It's kind of important to us. We chose to administer the SSI to all of our enrolled students in lieu of using a sample, because we wanted to further investigate the Longwood student experience from multiple perspectives. For that purpose, student subgroups were formed, again, based on self-reported demographics, and we completed comparison group reports on each. You can find these complete reports on the Student Affairs Assessment website. There's a URL at the end of the presentation. But I did pull together some slides for you that provide some comparisons on at the scale level and on those overall summary items. So what we have here, this was kind of an exercise. I won't say it was worth my time, actually. I went through the different student subgroups and was trying to determine if our students value things at different levels, and did some comparisons across our subgroups. And the only thing of interest that I came up with is with regard to our students of color. They rank these items on these scales at a little bit different level than some of the other student groups. If you want to take the time, you can look through them yourself. I didn't find anything that was really worth sharing with you. Now, I did find some interesting findings when I started to compare the performance gaps across the students' subgroups. Remember, the performance gap measures the degree to which students' expectations are being met within the context of what they think is important. Remember, the lower or the smaller the gap, the better. So if you skim across the scale performance gaps, you'll find that on 6 of the 12 possible comparisons, 50% of them, the largest performance gaps are noted in red, and they are attributed to the students who indicated a disability. Okay. On all of the other 6 possible comparisons, the largest performance gaps were reported by the students of color. The 33 varsity athletes, they reported the lowest performance gaps on 5 of the potential comparisons, and they're noted in green. Give you a minute to kind of absorb that so you can better understand the tables to follow. Okay, this table shows some comparisons. Yes, I've always provided the Longwood results from our 792, the general populations, but then I broke out those groups into the schools with which they reported they were affiliated. Again, these subgroups are all self-reported demographics. And then at the end, the last 2 columns, this was the item where students were asked if Longwood was their institution of first choice. And I collapsed the second and third into Longwood was not the institution of first choice. With the exception on the academic advising scale, the performance gaps reported by the students within the College of Business and Economics are the lowest, whereas the highest performance gaps were more scattered. Generally, we don't make comparisons amongst our colleges because the experiences are so vastly different, but I was just trying to pick up some patterns. As expected, the students for whom Longwood was not their first choice reported larger performance gaps than did the students for whom Longwood was their first choice. Okay, I thought it was interesting to make some comparisons of the performance gaps among the different class levels, and a couple of patterns emerged to some degree. For the most part, the lowest performance gaps were reported by the freshmen, and to a somewhat lesser degree, the higher gaps by the seniors. These findings are contradictory to our expectations, and they need to be further examined. Can't make a lot of sense out of that one. Remember those 3 summary items that the SSI uses to assess overall satisfaction? Those were these questions, and be reminded that each prompt has its own 7-point scale, and here are the results across our student subgroups. Note that the female students consistently indicate the highest levels of satisfaction. On all 3 summary items intended to measure overall satisfaction, the ratings of our sophomores exceeded that of the other class level students. Okay, not by a lot, but consistently across all 3. And these again are the comparisons across the college. And I didn't see any real consistent pattern surface on this one. Okay, this is the chart where I collapsed the 2 higher response options on each item, and I've provided the percentage of students who responded using those. Be reminded that when we compared the percentage of Longwood students to the percentage of the national group students, all of the Longwood percentages who reported with these higher ratings exceeded those of the national group. This chart shows that 34% of the Longwood respondents said that Longwood had met their expectations quite a bit or much better than expected. Other than the pattern already noted for the female students, I didn't pick up anything else real consistent. But take some time at your leisure and dig into the subgroups that are of most importance to you. See if you can make some meaning out of this. These are the same results across the school affiliations. And these are the same results across class year. The results seem pretty flat, not a lot of variance here, but it is true the sophomore percentages were consistently higher just a bit on each item, which, I don't know, that may have some implications for our retention efforts. I teach a sophomore level retention class. I'm going to pretend that that has something to do with it. Who knows? Not surprisingly, the students for whom Longwood was their first choice reported higher levels of overall satisfaction than the students for whom Longwood was not their first choice. And I think it's particularly gratifying to learn that our high achievers, those with a GPA of 3.0 or above, consistently report higher levels of satisfaction than the general student body, and also higher than the other subgroups illustrated on the previous slides. It's good to know we're meeting their needs, at least to some degree. Okay, that wraps us up. What I want to make sure you understand is there's more information, and there are additional SSI reports available on our Student Affairs Assessment and Evaluation website. And I'll also provide some information that will take you to the Noel-Levitz Student Satisfaction Inventory if you'd like to learn more about that and its uses. Thank you for your time.